I am at the Albert Dock, and behind me is the International Slavery Museum, which was opened in 2007, exactly 200 years after the abolition of the slave trade in Britain. Now, about 30 years before the slave trade was abolished in Britain, around the 1780s, Liverpool was best known for the slave trade. Liverpool was the European capital of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, Liverpool now is about to become the capital of song and dance and colour and craziness as Eurovision hits the stage of the M&S Echo Arena. Now, if you went around Europe today and asked people what Liverpool is famous for, they would probably say things like, well, the Beatles. They would say football. They would say Eurovision. If you went back in time to the 1780s, about 240 years ago, and said, what is Liverpool famous for? They'd likely say the slave trade. It's thought that about 1.5 million Africans came in on Liverpool ships, and that Liverpool was responsible for about half of Britain's slave trade. Now, in 1807, that was when the slave trade in Britain was abolished, and the campaign was led by a man called William Wilberforce. He was a Christian politician, and he believed that God created all men, all women, equal. He believed in what Paul wrote in Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, where he says that there is neither Greek nor Jew, there's neither slave nor free, there's neither male or female, everyone is one in Christ. And what does he mean by that? He doesn't mean that there's no such thing as Jews, no such thing as Greeks, no such thing as slaves, no such thing as free people, no such thing as men, no such thing as women. We all know those things exist. That's not what he's saying. He's saying the value of importance we give to one over the other isn't necessary. The value that some people might have given to Jews over Greeks, or Greeks over Jews, the value some people might give to men over women, or women over men, the value some people might have given to slaves, well, they wouldn't. Free people over slaves, that's irrelevant, Paul was saying, because everyone is one in Jesus. And William Wilberforce believed that. And that led him to campaign for the slave trade in Britain to be abolished. And eventually in 1807, it was. Now, I think liberty is something that we take for granted so much. Do you know, there were countries in the world where, for things I've said so far in this video, I'd be arrested. There are countries in the world right now, today, that if I was heard making this video, I would be arrested. Why? Because I've said the word Christian. I've quoted from the Bible. I have said about Jesus. There are places in the world today where that would get me arrested. There are places in the world today where that would get me murdered. We have so much freedom, so much liberty in this country to think what we want to think, believe what we want to believe, and in a lot of ways say what we want to say, do what we want to do. The liberty that we have is incredible, and we can take it for granted so often. The question, though, is what we do with our liberty. What do we do with this freedom, all this power that we have? How are we using it? William Wilberforce, that Christian politician who led the campaign to abolish the slave trade in Britain, he said this. He said, "It is the duty of every man to promote the happiness of his fellow creatures to the utmost of his power. In other words, he said, it's everyone's duty to do everything we can to promote other people's happiness. And we can use our freedom, we can use our liberty to make that happen. But the question is, how are you using your liberty? How are you using your freedom? Does all of the liberty that you have, the freedom you have, the power you have, is that always directed towards your happiness? Or are you someone who uses your liberty, uses your power, uses your freedom that you have for the happiness of others around you? What are you going to use the great freedom and liberty that we have for? For your happiness alone, or the happiness of people around you? What are you going to do?